You're listening to the Sixers Beat with your host, Derek Bodner, right here on LibertyBallers.com and LibertyBroadcast.co.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Derek Bodner here with the Sixers Beat, part of the CLNS Media Network. I'm joined by my cohort over at The Athletic Philadelphia, which self-promotion launches Tuesday, Rich Hofmann, and also with Max Rappaport, who, I guess, how would I, Liberty Ballers? That's still a thing, right? Like you still write
the
for
Step
them.
Over podcast.
Step Over podcast fame. Not optionalities, Step Over tees, even though I still think of it as optionality. But
all my Twitter content is free, no ad wall or no paywall.
But the multi-talented Max Rappaport. How you guys doing?
Thank you. Doing pretty well.
Good, man.
Good. As always, if you can, we haven't done this in a while, so we will beg for 5-star ratings and reviews now. If you can go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. We appreciate that. Also, head over to SixersBeat.com if you need any links to subscribe. But my guess is if you're listening to this intro right now, you have probably already subscribed, and we thank you for that. I guess there's still, we've got, training camp in about 3 weeks. Probably going to meet with Brett Brown sometime in the next 2 weeks or so. But we're still kind of in that dead period. There's some basketball being played right now in the world in the Euro Cup tournament, EuroBasket tournament, I'm sorry. And we will talk about that. We had both Saric and Furkan Korkmaz play today. Saric obviously with a much bigger role. But all right, I guess we'll just start off right there with those two guys. They both played today. Saric earlier in the day, Korkmaz later. Any real initial impressions on how those guys fared in their first non-friendly action of the tournament?
Dario looks skinny. Seems like he was, swimming some laps in the Adriatic Sea this summer. I don't know, but that was really the only thing I took. He didn't play that well today. But he still managed 15 points fairly easily because, he's just better than most of the other players he's going to find in this tournament. I guess the thing that struck me watching that game is it's not as interesting to watch him anymore now that we've seen him play a full NBA season and know what his strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, he played 81 games last year. That was quite a sample size to sort of gauge where he's at. And, it was good to see him playing. He takes obviously a lot of pride playing for that Croatian team. But yeah, I'm not as interested as I was last year. I guess the one thing I will say that's worth watching is his shooting form and whether he starts to put a little more arc under the ball. And while it seemed like I saw a little bit of that tonight, I mean, it was only like 2 or 3 shots. So it's not anything you can even really discuss at this point yet.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is that it's, he's got, it's still the FIBA line. So he's got a foot and a half less of distance to travel. So, sometimes taking that extra step back is where that flatness in the shot comes from. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It seemed like it was somewhat better, but it is, we're talking about a couple of shots that could have been just randomness.
Yeah, I think that Rich is right about a couple things. One, I had the same reaction, and I guess I had the same reaction in all the highlights from the friendlies from the last couple weeks too, is that he looks more like a 3 now than he did coming in last season. And almost, I feel like his body and the way he's playing and his role in Croatia feels more like when he was in the Adriatic League before going to Turkey. Like when they drafted him, when you watched highlights of Dario, it was more playing in that ball handling 3 role, and he was a little bit thinner then. And then when he went to Ephes, it seemed like he put on weight and really only played the 4. So it's kind of interesting. I guess I don't really feel like I have a good sense of how the Sixers want to use him this year now that Simmons is back. But I could see him playing a little more 3 this season just because you have Simmons. And then the other thing is, I think it's funny, like I had the reaction today to Korkmaz and Saric playing that like 3 years ago or 2 years ago or even like last summer, this would have been something we were really pumped about, and like Sixers fans would have been all over, and like you would have seen a lot more excitement around it on Twitter. And I feel like we've kind of reached a point where like Furkan Korkmaz highlights are like so far down the list of things we're excited about, whereas we were like dying for this kind of stuff a couple years ago.
We're in a slightly different place now than we were. That's for damn sure. Yes.
That's so true. Like, the only other people I saw tweeting about even Saric's game were people who were paid to watch it, basically. So yeah, it's definitely a different time period. I also, when it comes to his him slimming down a little bit, it will be curious to see, because like his team got smoked on the boards today against like a worse team. And there was really no doubt in the fourth quarter who was going to win. But part of the reason it was even a close game, because it was a talent mismatch, was that the Hungarian team was just killing the Croatians on the boards. I wasn't watching Dario close enough to know if like he wasn't boxing out. The announcers were saying he wasn't boxing out. I'm not sure it was all of that, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how a slimmer frame sort of translates to the NBA, because on the one hand, like, it's not like he loses a few pounds and then starts moving like a gazelle out there. He's not the quickest player, regardless of, you know, how much weight he loses. But on the other hand, like maybe he will be able to sort of slither around in space. He had a couple nice drives today that it might have just been the talent disparity there, but I'll be curious to see how that translates to the NBA, because it's noticeable that he has lost the weight, but I'm not sure I really notice it when he plays. Like, I'm not sure how that changes his game any more than he just lost a few more pounds. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely did struggle on the boards, and his positioning was not great. I'm not sure that's all size and bulk. Like, he was just out of position a lot. It seemed like he was really reliant on tip rebounds to kind of make up for that. But in terms of playing the three, you know, obviously losing weight and being lighter on your feet will help. But I still worry that even when I watched Saric play when he was younger, and I mean, he's been on the radar for quite a few years now, even when he was 16, 17, 18 years old and not really physically developed, he still, I don't think, had the foot speed to defend an NBA three. So I do worry a little bit, is he still going to be able to bang down low? Because I still think his limitations are going to relegate him mostly to at least defensively, to a power forward spot. It really is, like you guys said, it's amazing how this was so much less of a big deal. And I mean, look, it wasn't the greatest competition, it wasn't the sexiest competition. Not very many people really care about the Hungarian national team. My family is from Hungary, and I didn't care about the Hungarian national team. But it is, even as he ramps up, it's just, you have so many other things to look forward to. I think people right now are more invested in Joel Embiid's Instagram and in Markelle Fultz and Ben Simmons and whatever they're doing in their respective corners of the world and whatever they're tweeting out and posting about that than they are really about this EuroBasket tournament. And I mean, that makes a little bit of sense, in part because the team is so much more exciting, but also in part because, because we saw Dario Saric play 81 games in the NBA. Really, if you're watching this right now, it's just because you're desperate for basketball, which I completely understand.
From our nerdy point of view, what did you guys think of Korkmaz? Because that was more interesting to me than Saric even.
Yeah, he got the second half start. Got quite a bit more minutes in the second half. You know, he's kind of interesting because somebody mentioned this to me today about Saric, and they're like, man, he looks like his defense is better. And I generally think Saric's defense looks better in these kind of international competitions because the athleticism disparity just isn't quite as large. And Saric, he's puts in the effort. He's fundamentally sound. He knows what he's doing defensively. He just can't do it against the kind of caliber of athletes that you'll see in the NBA. And I think Korkmaz is a little bit like that too. You know, he's sitting here, he's giving effort. He's fighting through screens. He's trying to fight through screens. But screens that he can get through in Europe, I worry about how he's going to get through them in the NBA. But I mean, he looked good. He made a three. You know, he can clearly handle the ball a little bit. I'm excited for him. I still worry about the first year, 2 years of his NBA career and whether or not he's going to be able to compete physically.
Yeah, the Turkish national team seems like a pretty good situation for him. They're a bunch of young guys. They were sort of pressing Russia like crazy, and that was actually a pretty exciting game. But yeah, it seems like, yeah, I wouldn't say I was a little underwhelmed with Korkmaz at Summer League, but Again, I think he also has the excuse of that was probably a pretty big culture shock. He was pretty much
came in like halfway through too.
Yeah, like it was instantaneous, and obviously Summer League isn't the most organized, structured form of basketball. I thought he looked good. I thought the coach started to clearly trust him. I mean, he made some mistakes at the end of the game, but yeah, I enjoyed watching him run the pick and roll. He can clearly make shots off the dribble, which is a nice attribute to have. And yeah, I think in European play, there aren't the type of wings you're going to see in the NBA. But he defended really well today, which was cool to see. I'm pretty excited to watch him the rest of the tourney.
Hey, Max, buddy, you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. I wasn't able to watch Korkmaz's game, so I was just going to let you two take that.
That was
part
probably something you could have told us before we started the podcast.
I'm
Max.
sorry.
Well,
that's all right. That's probably all we could have said about Korkmaz anyway.
Next podcast, I expect you to be an expert.
Yes. I had to get up real early out here. I mean, Dario's game started at like 5 a.m. Pacific, so it's rough.
It was really early. I knew it was going to be 11 o'clock, and I still almost missed it because I was still getting into my routine. All right, we'll get back to the podcast in just a bit. But before we do, I want to tell you about our sponsor. Football is just around the corner, which means fantasy football is back. FanDuel is fantasy football for everyday fans, with new contests starting each week and no busted seasons. There's something for everyone with FanDuel, with lots of contests to choose from, starting at just $1. Just pick a contest, choose your team, and watch your score in real time. Over 2.5 million players have already won a cash prize playing fantasy sports on FanDuel, and you could be next. Not only that, but it makes every game more exciting and keeps you glued to your TV all weekend long. Try FanDuel for free with no deposit required. Visit FanDuel.com to claim your free contest and play for a share of $10,000. Just sign up using promo code SixersBeat. That's FanDuel.com, promo code SixersBeat. Void where prohibited. All right, let's move on to expectations for a season. Vegas just put out, I think the over-under was for either 41.5 or 42.5, which in our realm, in our universe, is a very big number. I think a lot of us, we focus a lot on, how we can get there, how the Sixers can get there. And Joel Embiid and how he can turn them into a one of the best defenses in the league. And how Markelle Fultz and Ben Simmons to initiate the offense and JJ Redick to provide spacing can help improve what has been the worst offense in the league for a couple of years running now. But I kind of wanted to flip that over and ask you if there was one thing that would keep you up at night that could prevent this team from reaching those expectations and reaching their potential, not counting Joel Embiid's health. What would it be?
Okay. I mean, beyond Embiid getting hurt, I honestly don't really think there's that much that could derail. Like, I think if Embiid's healthy for 50-plus games this season, I have a really hard time seeing the season be like quote-unquote derailed. Even if Ben Simmons really struggles or he gets hurt, even if Markelle Fultz isn't the player we think he is, or JJ Redick doesn't translate as well, I feel like if Embiid's healthy, they win at least 32, 33 games. And beyond that, I would see that as not a derailing of the season. Like, that's basically that's like the lower end of reasonable what I expect for this season, but like, if they won more than 30 games, I would think that's fine. If all
What's
these other
your biggest
things went
concern,
wrong.
Max? Play the game. What's your biggest concern?
I mean, Embiid getting hurt.
No, besides that. It's too obvious.
My biggest concern is them getting off to a slow start for whatever number of reasons, whether it's injury or not, and something happening with Brett Brown. That would be like more of a derailing of where I hope the team's heading. But that's like the only really bad case other than Embiid getting hurt that I could see this season, like coming from this season.
Yeah, I mean, Embiid being healthy, like Embiid's health is far and away the biggest issue. Like, I would even like up what Max said. Probably, if they got him for 60 games, I would be really surprised if they couldn't win at least 35. He's that good, and the East is that bad. Yeah, and as far as like the schedule goes, I agree with what he's saying because there's a lot of really tough games at the beginning of the year, and it might just be with the way that the NBA is covered and everybody obsesses over everything. If they get off to a slow start this year, Brett Brown is really going to hear it. Like there will be, a ton of blogs getting on him. There will be TV shows dedicated to the NBA, podcasts. There will be people who are saying, is this guy really a good coach? Because now he finally has the talent and the Sixers are pretty much right where they are. But like other than that, I mean, I guess it's just the fact that they're slotting in two young guys into the rotation and they're counting on both of them in Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz. And in general, young guys do not win in the NBA. But even that, like, who are they replacing? I mean, Markelle Fultz is replacing Sergio Rodriguez and TJ McConnell, who's still here. So it's not like they're downgrading there. And Ben Simmons, I mean, Ersan Ilyasova was a nice fit with Joel Embiid, but, basically the whole power forward rotation is back besides that too. So, yeah, I just would say that I'm a little worried that the young guys, that they're going to take a little while to get going, especially with the schedule, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Max's point was probably where I was going to go, in part because I expected somebody to go with Ben Simmons. But I think Max's point, so much, it's so easy to look at the expectations of this team and to get enticed by the playoffs to overreact. And I think with the difficulty of the early season schedule, with integrating two new primary ball handlers, with a new player in JJ Redick, with Joel Embiid, who hasn't played a game since January, and I think it's easy to forget that, it's tailor-made for a slow start. And I think when you look at the team, the only reason I think it would be justifiable, especially early in the season, to get rid of Brett Brown, is if Brian Colangelo walked up and he watched the practices and he said, look, I don't think Brett's doing a good job developing the young talent. I don't think the priorities he's setting out are the right ones. I don't think the methods he's using to try to teach them is the way to go about it. And I think there's a very low chance of that happening. If it's just record, if just one loss, if it's just competitiveness, I think you need that continuity for these young guys, that single voice to help get them to the next level. And that is my biggest, I mean, and this isn't even a Brian, last year we said this, hey, maybe Brian Colangelo could use a slow start as an excuse to get his own job. I don't even think we're talking about that. I just think it's human nature and the nature of the NBA to overreact to adversity. And that's probably my biggest early season concern. Where I would go after that is Ben Simmons. And look, it's great that he talked recently about, I'm going to shoot threes this year. Well, show me. I mean, really show me. And not that I expect him to come out and shoot 35%, but I need him to take it. And I need him to show that he can at least be a streaky shooter. And maybe right now that just means he takes, 2 a game and makes a 27% clip. I'm not even really looking for, effectiveness, certainly not consistency. I'm looking for a willingness and a hope. And if he can't do that, for all the physical gifts in the world he has, and he certainly does have them, but if he can't struggle to make outside shots or make shots off the dribble, then it's really going to be hard to be a primary initiator in the NBA. And it's also going to be hard to be valuable off the ball when Markelle Fultz is initiating for the team. So I just want to see something to give me hope. And again, that doesn't have to be out of the gate. That doesn't have to be consistency, just something to show progress going forward.
Are you interested at all how Simmons will deal with, I don't want to say failure, but, not an amazing amount of success to begin the season? Because,
yes,
he gives these interviews where he's like, no, I don't want to be the rookie of the year. I want to be LeBron level right away. And, when you hear him talk and, you see that, he has a lot of confidence in himself, which is not a bad thing. But I'll be interested to see, if teams start going under that screen and he's only a 24% 3-point shooter for a little while, I'll be interested to see, because that's a lonely place to be. And for someone who is basically, despite the fact that his college team wasn't that good, who has been super successful for all of his life, I'm a little more interested to see how he deals with that than, say, Markelle Fultz, because Fultz was, when you listen to his comments, it seems like he's ready for a learning curve of some sort.
I don't know how concerned I am about that. I guess I'm more concerned about team success than like Ben Simmons getting off to a rough start and that shaking his confidence or, causing issues for him. I'm more concerned about, like, I think that for good reason, because the team's gotten a lot better, and also because the mood around the team, the way the national media is talking about them, like, I think is a little overblown. I'm sure we'll talk about the 42.5, over under, but I think that the fact that so many people are thinking playoffs this year, that they're on national TV so much, that, ticket sales are through the roof and excitement about the team in Philly is so high, like, I think it's people are getting a little too ahead of themselves, and I don't think they'll be able to meet those expectations, especially early in the year, or I don't expect them to, at least. I could see that being a bigger issue, like team success and wins and losses, and say they start the year 2-8 or something. Like, I could see that being a bigger issue than Ben Simmons struggling, like, individually.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a team that needed a really soft early season schedule, this was probably it. And for them to come out and have the hardest schedule in the league in October and November, it's not ideal. I mean, it's not the end of the world, because at the end of the day, all Eastern Conference schedules are pretty much the same. But you certainly would have, for the reasons Max talked about and the way they react to adversity, you certainly would have liked to have seen, that spread out a little more evenly. And I do agree with Rich that you want to see how people react individually to adversity too, because certainly, I mean, we can excuse LSU as much as we want, and certainly that was a bad environment for him. But there were more than a few rumblings that maybe that team didn't react the way it should have to adversity. And ultimately, he's 19, 20 years old at the time, in a bad spot. For the most part, I agree with that. But you do at some point still have to react, in a productive manner, and that'll be interesting too. And I mean, this is a level of competition, a level of athleticism that he's never gone against, and there certainly is a possibility that jump shot could be a bigger hindrance than it's ever been. How does he react to that, both tactically and from a mental standpoint?
So what do we think about that number?
I was kind of saying around 43. And that's in large part because I think they're going to get hope, I guess, is probably the better word for it. That they'll get 60 games out of Embiid, and that Redick and Covington, along with Embiid, will give them at least some form of almost like a calming influence, because they know what they can rely upon those guys for, Covington defensively and Redick offensively. I'd say right around 43 wins, but it certainly has a chance of going down from there if injuries and or the rookie struggles are a little more than expected.
I'll ask you guys this question, because I think it kind of gets at that number. What do you think if everything goes right this season? And that's development of young players, JJ Redick's fit, Embiid stays healthy. Like, what is the absolute highest number of wins you could reasonably see them winning this season?
See, and this is why I would take the under. 45,
it's probably like
46.
I was going to say 47, but that I was not sure of.
It's way too close to the line, and the worst case is they win like 24 games. And I think, like, if you look at it like a scatter plot, there's so much in that under that, like, if any one thing goes wrong, especially Embiid, that's like in itself is, if Embiid gets hurt, they're not winning 43 games unless he gets hurt at the very end of the season or something. Like, you need Embiid to be healthy the whole year, and then you need a lot of stuff to go right. It doesn't need to be like outrageous. It's not like Markelle Fultz and Simmons need to be the two best rookies in the league, but like other things need to go well too, and that's just to get them to barely over that 42.5. That's why I just feel like I would probably set it at like 38, 37.5, somewhere around there.
I will say, if Embiid is healthy, and that's a ginormous if, but if you get 60 games out of Embiid and they win less than 37 games, I would be floored. So I think that scatter plot, if you just factor in, remove one variable from that equation, I think that scatter plot is a lot more condensed. And that 43, 41, 42, 43 win range is a lot more realistic. That being said, Embiid's health is a giant fucking unknown. Like
the biggest question
you can't
mark
just
the
remove
whole
that
season.
variable. Yeah, maybe in the whole league, certainly, maybe in the whole Eastern Conference. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, I just can't see them. Like sometimes you do see teams like. Does anybody remember what the Thunder went from? And now obviously this was, I think, in Durant's third year and Westbrook's second year, but they made a pretty sizable jump. It's like reasonably, I can't picture. I have so many friends and like Sixers diehards that I think somewhat jokingly, but maybe not all of them, say 50 wins like excitedly this summer, and they're just high off the Fultz trade and Simmons coming back and everything JoJo did last year. It's just like, man, I really can't see more than like 46 or 47 wins. Like just that number just doesn't seem right. I will say, I do think, I agree with Derek that my range of outcomes would be a little more condensed than what Max said. They won 28 games with Embiid playing 30 games last year. Like, and they didn't get worse. Like they got a little younger, but they didn't get worse. I don't see their personnel as like taking a major step back outside of that. And in many ways with Redick offensively, it probably took a step forward. But yeah, like to me, the range of outcomes it's pretty wide too. It's probably like 31 to 32 to 45. And yeah, I mean, if you put that in the middle, that number would be 38. And also like in terms of playoffs, because for some reason playoffs have been termed like the measure of success coming into this season. 38 wins probably does get you into the playoffs this year in the East.
I would be stunned if 38 wins didn't get you into the playoffs in the East. The East is that bad, and there's so little depth once you get past the top 5 or so.
I mean, looking at the over-unders set in Vegas, 38 would get you in. It's basically the Pistons, I think, are right at 38.5 wins, and they would be the last team. And if you look at the standings, I mean, it's basically there are 9 teams in the East competing for the 8 spots. Off the top of my head, I can't think of all the teams, but it's basically a huge drop-off after that 9th team, which I think is basically it's the Pistons and maybe us and Charlotte. But then after that, it's real bad. Like, I just don't see any of those teams. The Hawks, the Bulls, the Knicks, the Nets. Like, I don't see any of those teams really competing for a spot.
So it's
I'd have a hard time imagining unless something really goes wrong, the Sixers not being the 9th worst team in the league. Like the 9 seed would be like the low point, unless something goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 teams battling for 2 spots. The Sixers, this young, exciting core, and then 2 of the most boring teams in the league.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
But I wouldn't be surprised if those 2 boring teams finished out of the Sixers, though, at least for this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much. You know, if you take Embiid away from this team, then you're looking at 2 lead ball handlers and a defense that I don't know how much it's going to compete. You know, when you start looking at it like, okay, your point guard is Fultz. He's going to be a negative defensively. Your shooting guard is Redick, obviously. Not a negative, but, I mean, he certainly has his deficiencies. Okay, 3, you got Covington. 4, you've got Simmons, who's probably going to be a negative considering all the learning he has to do and the effort questions. And then you don't have a 5-man to lock that down. That changes the equation on that side of the court drastically. And when you're that dependent on one player, and that one player is so unknown, then yeah, this could go. You know, again, I don't think we're even in the worst case scenario, we're talking less than, you know, maybe 30 wins. But there's a pretty big difference between 30 and 38. And you could certainly see the bottom end of that equation if Embiid's not a go. All right. I think that's probably about it. Don't need to have an hour-long podcast in the early part of September when the biggest thing to talk about is a Hungary-Croatia game that nobody even really watched. So thank you guys for jumping on. Once again, follow Rich _Hofmann, Max at Max Rappaport, and we will talk to you soon.
See ya.
See ya.
You've been listening to the Sixers Beat right here on LibertyBallers.com and LibertyBroadcast.co.
Contacted, I attract clientele. My mic check is life or death, breathing a sniper's breath. I exhale the yellow smoke, a Buddha through righteous steps, deep like the shining, sparkle like